Well, hello everyone, and welcome back. I guess we're going to go on with a little more truth discussion today. It's a personal favorite subject of mine, and suppose we're going to try to get off just the dealing with it as part of a modern world. We're not done talking about the problem of it, and I guess we've talked some about ways to deal with it, but we'll get more into that too. Maybe not this video, but before the series is over, we're going to get there. So, what other problems do we have with truth? We've talked about misinformation in the world, things going on in the world news, that kind of thing. We've talked about emotional states. We've talked about lies as a mechanism for control, or weird manipulations of truth to get at compliance or control. Definitely things that happen, but not the only kind of truth we need to seek. There are wild topics of how do we even begin to understand truth and things like religion or spirituality or things of that nature. Now, I don't know what kind of person you are, but I have been a sincere seeker of truth. I want to understand the nature of the universe. I want so many answers. And that's why I seek. Truth is just I mean, it's almost like a drug to me. Like I need truth. I need to understand, and that's I think part of why I think so much. And so now, to contextualize truth, I'm going to tell you a story. It's a deeply personal story about a deeply spiritual and personal thing that I went through. It's going to take a little bit of setup, and it may be the basis for most of this video. It's kind of interesting. But what I want to talk about is something akin to a near-death experience, and I'm not going to tell you up front what I believe. I'm going to tell you what happened, and then we're going to talk about how that impacted my beliefs, how that impacted my search for truth, and those kind of things. But we're in territory. I say it's near-death experience. At no time during the story was my life in danger, but extreme pain was at play, and we know that people have these near death type experiences, extreme pain when they're dying, a lack of oxygen for a while. But extreme pain and lack of oxygen are the two most significant ones that I know of. And there are some reasons that this may happen in the brains of science that we may understand why these happen. But for now, we're contextualizing in a near-death experience as an experience that happened due to some force, some kind of pain, or otherwise mine was extreme pain, and that'll be clear in the story. But I think that was a trigger, and I am not claiming that there is spirituality with this story. We'll talk about more out of it once we get through it. Now, I may have mentioned briefly before that I happen to be a bit of a miracle person by my standard, I guess. I got sick. I ended up being mostly bedridden for about 4 years. I had agonizing pain whenever I would get into the car. It was, I don't know if it was a vibration thing or maybe just an energy exertion. I don't know. A lot of days I'd stay in bed and do nothing. I could just manage to entertain myself with a TV and a phone just to I mean, it was bad. Agony for 4 years. And it was interesting because there was a point where I was in such bad pain. I got a tooth infection, and I ignored the tooth infection. The tooth infection was nothing, and I just had to deal with my pain. It was abdominal pain. We're not going to talk about the whole journey of the 4 years. We're going to talk about one specific point, but we will talk about that at this point in my journey, I had been in pain for so long, and the medical answers were so poor that even I doubted what was real, what was truth. Was I having pain? Was the pain real? Were the explanations that we were seeing on imaging sufficient to explain the experience that I was having? Was it just that I was a weak person and a little bit of pain was disproportionately affecting me to what it was? Like, was I dealing with a stubbed toe and behaving as though I had a constant kidney stone? I really had those doubts in my life. I really didn't know what to do. And during that time, I developed a tooth infection. And I had had this tooth infection for weeks. I was married at the time, and I hid it from my wife because I didn't want to get in the car and go to the dentist. It really wasn't that big of a deal. Well, this infection kept going over the course of weeks, and then there was a point where I couldn't hide it anymore because while the pain really wasn't the driving force, it was that my face had swelled up. I had swelled up all the way around my eye was swelling up, like, because my tooth pain, it was an upper tooth on the left side of my face, and the swelling just ran up my face and into my eye, and so my ex-wife started asking questions about my swelling face, and that's when I revealed I had a tooth infection, and of course she set me up to go to the dentist or whatever, and anyway, so I think the appointment was a couple days out, which is no big deal. Like I said, this was not the biggest pain in my life, and I started to realize at that point. So this is where that what I was talking about earlier, where I was beginning to doubt my pain. Well, that's not the first tooth infection I had. I remember the infection of a tooth pain actually being pretty significantly horrible. And here I was ignoring it for weeks. Like, it would throb when I'd lay my head down, still not enough to overcome what other pain that I had. It was just whatever. Okay, I got a soreness. I got real pain to deal with. And when the day came that we went to the dentist, we got there, and it was kind of a wild thing. The dentist said that the infection was so bad that novocaine was unlikely to cause any pain management, that the nerve was probably too tied up in the infection, that there probably wouldn't be any effect from the novocaine, and even if there was, it would be so minimal that I'd be feeling a tooth pull. And he starts telling me that I'm gonna go home and take some antibiotics for a few days, and I'll come back after the infection isn't so bad, so that he could pull the tooth. And I told that dentist that I understand and that I see that, but I won't be making another appointment because I'm not getting back in the car, because this isn't the worst pain that I have today. I'm going to go home and I'm going to put a pair of pliers on it or do whatever I have to do, because getting back in the car, I promise you, is worse than anything you can do to my tooth. And that's what I told him. I told him I was going to go home and pull with pliers because it didn't even hurt that bad. And he started explaining. He's like, "You don't understand. This isn't like nobody like people that come in like." And he explained. He's like, "Yours still seems localized and it's still swelling." He's like, "You have to understand that people get hospitalized over infections like this." I didn't care. It wasn't my biggest problem of the day. And he's like, I've never, like, that bad of an infection, you shouldn't be able to talk to me. You shouldn't be able to move your face. And as we were talking, I could see he realized I was not fucking around. He realized I was telling him that this doesn't hurt. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't hurt. It wasn't my problem. It wasn't enough to make me flinch. And that day, not only, we'll get to more of the story. This gets so much better. But this is about the point where I'm realizing I'm not making this up. I'm not some weak dude with no pain tolerance. This isn't the end all be all. And I started having some of those thoughts. Well, because of this, he's like, this infection is so bad, you probably are better having me pull it. I can get you antibiotics and things. We'll put you on that. And I'll go ahead and pull it today if you think you can handle that. But we're talking about an unnumbed tooth being pulled out of your head, and that's what he's trying to explain to me. He was trying to talk me out of it. He was trying to talk me into a way of doing it that he thought would be less painful for me. Now, who's got a frame of reference if somebody's got an infection in their face like that doesn't even care about the pain? Like, who's got that frame of reference? Again, he probably didn't have the emotional bandwidth to deal with that, like we talked about earlier in the series. What's he supposed to do with that? He's not even sure I should be able to talk with him, let alone argue about him and tell him this pain doesn't matter. It's all like, it seemed crazy to him, and I see why, because it is kind of crazy. Well, anyway, he goes. He spends forever trying to numb me. He said that he used like 3 or 4 times more than he would normally use for something like this. He said he was doing his best to make me not feel it or whatever. And he was doing that every once in a while. He'd be jamming the needle in something, and I'd be flinching, and he'd be apologizing. I'm like, dude, yeah, the flinch is a reflex. It's not actually hurting that bad. And I'm sorry if I sounded kind of macho. I just don't think you understand how much doubt I had about my own pain tolerance at the time. And this is as much about me convincing myself that I didn't waste 4 years of my life on pain that wasn't real, because this was the moment that convinced me all that was real, instead of wondering if I was just weak or something. So I guess that's why I'm focusing on those details. Well, he gets it all numbed up, and then he's like, okay, now I've put a bunch in there. Now we just need to give it a few minutes to seep in or whatever. And he goes and he walks out of the room for a little while. And he comes back, and he asks me how I'm feeling, and I'm like, I don't know, it's fine. And it wasn't that big of a deal. I could feel how it feels all swollen when you're numbed up if you've never had it. So I felt like my whole face was just swollen, which it was, but it just felt swollen, maybe bigger than it was. Just felt swollen and poofy from my thing, and I could tell I couldn't feel my lips and whatnot. And so I knew I was numbed in places that weren't the infection, but I could definitely still feel it. And so he starts talking to me, and he's like, all right, well, this is probably going to hurt. I really don't know what else to do, since you're like, and so he was putting it back on me. You've insisted for this. Like, he's like, I mean, I think he was scared. I would be too. He's probably doing something that maybe he shouldn't have. He maybe should have refused. It's not on him what I do when I leave. It's on him for his actions. Maybe he shouldn't. Maybe I'll never tell him who it was, because I don't know. Maybe this is a terrible thing that he shouldn't have done, because it hurt a lot, and I loved it. He started pulling, and it started feeling like somebody was cutting me open with like a hot knife. I could feel heat and tearing, and I could feel it. And so I was just gripping the arm, white knuckling the armrest, right? And he's pulling this tooth out. And he's like, am I going too slow, or is that too much? Am I going too fast? And I'm like, I got my mouth open. I'm trying to tell him he's fine. It's funny. I'm trying to reassure him. And so he starts, and he starts wiggling this tooth. And one direction when he wiggled it, man, it did hurt. And I was white knuckling, worrying about pulling the fucking armrest off his dentist chair. It hurt. And it was over. And I couldn't believe it. My stomach didn't hurt for the first time in like 3.5 years. I pulled that tooth out, and it hurt so much. I got relief. If you've ever been in enough pain where just getting hurt more somewhere else made sense, if you don't understand what that's like, oh my God. It's like, it's euphoric. It's utopic. It's like there's an episode of Dr. House where he's dealing with his pain, and he breaks his own hand deliberately by just smashing something on his desk. He breaks his hand on purpose to get the effect that I just told you about. Oh God, is it real? It is so real, that effect. And then it ends. And oh my God, my stomach hurt again. And I didn't give a shit about my mouth again. And I'm bleeding. I can taste the blood, the horrible bitterness of the infection. It's gross as shit in my mouth. They're trying to do all this. And all I care about is that, oh fuck, the pain in my gut came back. That's where I'm at. Now, if you think that's the end of the story, we're not even there yet. We're not even there. We go through, we do that. He inspects his work, makes sure there's nothing else in there, and pokes around a little bit more. But it's essentially over. And we're driving home now. I'm in the passenger seat. I'm in no shape to drive. I hadn't driven in years at this point. And we're driving home. And I remember, all I can think about is my stomach didn't hurt for 5 fucking minutes or 2 minutes or whatever. Like it probably felt like 5 minutes because it was probably 10 seconds. And it felt like 5 minutes because, oh my God, the joy of that doesn't hurt for the first time in years. Whew, man. So what did I do on the way home? I chewed on the gauze in my infection. I was biting down on it, hoping to get that feeling again. All I wanted was for that pain to come out. I spent all night doing this. But on the way home, I did this, and there it was. I hit so much pain. Not only did it stop the pain in my belly, No, no, I went full on hallucination mode, right? This is what I'm talking about when I say NDE. I'm chewing on this gauze because I'm just trying to get relief. It's the most insane thing ever, right? Like chewing on something to cause more pain than insane pain so that you can be free of insane pain as long as it's something like it. Okay, this is how broken you get in a situation like that. And so I was chewing on the gauze and I full on hallucinated. I had a hallucination. And it's so weird because in this hallucination, my first memory was of a time when I was rock climbing and I had fallen. As a matter of fact, it ties in, it's a very interesting rock climbing thing that happened to me. I fell rock climbing and that knot hit me right about where my pain was. And in that was the couple month process that in my teen years resulted in me getting diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And it was from that rock climbing fall. I thought I got injured. I thought that the knot from the rock climbing equipment had tagged me in the belly. And I thought I had an injury. And that's why I went to the doctor in the first place. And when I went there and they're like, we can't find anything traumatic here. It seems to be more internal. That's when we got into looking for some of the other things. And we discovered I had ulcerative colitis. And so it was just weirdly coincidental that I had a fall and it drew my attention to a place where I had pain. Now, I had been having upset stomachs and whatnot, but I didn't think too much of it. I didn't eat real well. I used to drink a lot of soda and things. And so I just figured it was upset stomach or something, so I never really thought about it. But that caused enough pain to where it made me rethink what was going on. I thought I was injured. Well, I wasn't. I just had ulcerative colitis. But why did my hallucination start in that fall? That's an interesting question as I go through this. And I went through that fall, and then my hallucination went from there to where I was in something maybe akin to a board meeting. Now, it gets weird. We weren't humans. We were clouds of dust. I was a cloud of dust or light or, I don't know, it was like a cloud-like thing. And me and a whole bunch of other cloud-like things were like, we weren't sitting around a table, but we were like around a table. I don't think anybody was sitting. We were just clouds around this table. And we were, my hallucination that had started, the me falling, was like freeze framed up on like the wall, like we were watching a projection or something. But it was my experience. And so I'm sitting here like kind of in this boardroom, as we go along, I realize that this board meeting is like plans for my reincarnation before this life started. And I was presenting in front of the board that I wanted this life so that I could learn everything there is to know. And I got through that, and there are some other really weird tie-ins that don't make sense. I was convinced of them at my hallucination time, but I was convinced that like my ulcerative colitis somehow was a choice that I made before I chose to be reincarnated into this life, and that somehow played into my search for knowledge. And it was, anyway, it's just very weird. And that was my hallucination, right? Like I'm in this board meeting, like I guess convincing people that I should get this life before I get it and telling them what I want to do with it and that I want to learn everything. It was just very strange. And then it stops, and I'm back in the car, and the only thing that hurts is my stomach. But I didn't know what to do with that. And then as I thought about it in the waning days, I started realizing the other things. Like what I explained to you as it was happening. But like with all people you hear speak about and near-death experiences, I had that insane, overwhelming feeling like I was in a place of compassion and love. People describe this, they like to equate it with heaven, and that's what I did initially. I decided that this must have been me in heaven doing something. Clouds make sense for heaven and whatnot. It didn't really make sense with Christianity, which I was kind of losing faith in at the time, because being sick as I was for years, I literally was like I was the real life example of Job. I went out, I made a great living. I was computer programming. I was taking care of my family. I had a wonderful family. I had a wonderful set of friends. I had more stuff than I needed with plenty of money and savings. My life was gonna be fine. And then I got sick, and it just feels like I got the story of Job. I got sick, and that went on, and the government decided that I can't get Social Security because the doctors can't prove what my problem is. And there was a point that it just got too much for the ex-wife. There's all kinds of problems it had with it, and it caused me to start down, like, that was kind of the start to me really going down a road of trying to understand the world. And at first I took that to, I know we're getting there on time, but I want to get through this, and then we'll probably wrap up before we go on to the last part, or maybe the next part if it's not the last. But I started seeking. It really was telling that I felt that my purpose through that experience was to learn everything. I've always kind of been that way. I've always wanted to know more. And I took this to be some experience that may be Christian based, even though I was losing faith. And I had some weird feelings about that. I had some weird thoughts about maybe doubling down, getting more religious and all of that. And I wasn't sure what to do with that because it didn't fit what I said. And it led me to some strange places and some strange experiences with spirituality. And I guess we're going to need to talk about some of those to get at finding truth, because I guess the question this all poses is, how do we discern truth when we've had an experience like that? Now, I don't really believe in the spiritual. I don't really believe in reincarnation. I see that there are mechanisms that maybe there are things like that could work. I just don't see any evidence that it does work that way. And what do you do when your personal experience challenges knowledge, challenges fact, and runs into that road of what we do and don't know? And that's another thing that I had to go through. So I guess we'll pick up and talk a little bit more about some of the things I did to deal with that, some of the things that led me through, and some of the questions that maybe I wish I would have asked a little sooner, or other things that maybe I would have dealt with sooner, because it created a lot of questions for me. So with that, we will continue seeking truth in a future episode. I hope you've been enjoying the series so far, and I hope it's not too overwhelming and daunting. But I think these are things worth talking about, and I think these are things worth trying to manage. And with that, I say, until next time, be well.